People are pissed off at Unity right now, and holy cow, are they in some hot water. You can see their stock price this morning opened up with a huge drop, and it's crawled back a little bit, but 5% down today is quite a bit, and that all comes off the back of yesterday's announcement of Unity's planned pricing and package updates. Basically, what's happening here is that the Unity Runtime Fee is getting implemented, and that's based off of a game's installs. Now, I'm not going to go into the exact details of all of these changes, but the big thing here is that they fumbled the announcement. The big outcry from the community is questions of how is this going to impact me? Because that's what everyone's thinking. What is the impact? And they did have a FAQ releasing that, talking about some of the specific details around, kind of what is an install defined, how do they count that, what's going to happen for pirating, and they answered some of it, but it's missing the key details, especially from my perspective. I use Godot, but if I was a Unity user, how would I be thinking about this? And that would be in the specific details. They talk about how is an install defined. An install is defined as an installation of the project on the end user's device. That seems pretty generic. They also talk about how are they collecting it. They have their own proprietary data model. That doesn't help me really understand what that means. You're just saying, hey, we're not going to tell you because that's our secret. What does an install for a demo look like, or a beta access, or a QA? And they say that those are not going to count against your install counts, but they don't say how do I as a developer actually check that box to let you know that this is a QA build. I want the specific details. That's what people need. They need to know that if I give out 200 copies to my beta testers, that I'm not going to get charged $2,000 for that beta test, because a lot of companies don't have $2,000 to do beta testing like that, right? What about pirated games? And they say, we'd be happy to help with victims of piracy. But again, I as a developer be like, what does that process look like? Who do I reach out to? There's no email address that says, hey, hit this hotline, this is the piracy email address. And on top of that, they could go a step further and say, here's how you know you would have a game pirated, and here's things you can do to prevent piracy in the future. That would be cool. That would be very proactive of them to say, hey, we have this cool product you can use which helps prevent piracy. I don't know if that exists in Unity, but I think that would be a pretty cool thing for them to have done in this sort of information. When if I was a developer on Unity, I would come here panicking, looking for answers, and you would get some just kind of generic responses. And so I think that's the big problem here, is that Unity made this price increase, which they have every right to do. They are a for-profit company. They're a business. They need to make money. They need to pay their developers. They need to pay their investors. That all makes sense to me. But I think the big thing is the fumble of this really big announcement and not fully anticipating the questions of the community. But I pose a question here: that is Unity on a decline? And I want to take a step back and look at this from the last 5-year perspective. If you look at their stock, it peaked around $200 in 2021 and has since kind of declined, and really in the last year has been flat. And I want to go into a few of the news articles that I've seen over the last year that really show this trend, because one data point doesn't make a trend, but many over a year absolutely will make a trend for you. And I want to start with their internal project Gigia, which was announced at GDC 2022. I believe that was in March. And it was going to be this internal project that they were going to make and release to showcase how you can use the Unity engine and some of the best practices. They were also going to use it as an internal way to kind of dog food their project or figure out what the pain points were in developing it. But a short 2 or 3 months later, it has discontinued, and we're not going to see the light of day. It's been a year since then, and they still haven't published it. They talk about the reasoning being well justifying R&D resources, but at the same time, that feels a bit short-sighted. A project like this would help tremendously get a bunch of indie kind of novice developers. They could look at this project, take pieces they want to use in their own projects, and learn a lot from it. And ultimately, if their goal is to make more money from large studios need people to know how to develop games on Unity, and a project like this would go a long way to expanding the pool of resources of people that those bigger studios could hire. So although they don't quite see the value in releasing a project like this, and they didn't want to go through the cleanup and optimization of it, I think it's a bit short-sighted, because they could be a valuable thing that they could have out there for the community to use, and it would showcase what those fees that they are charging for those professional licenses of Unity, what those fees actually go to funding. And this announcement came at the same time that they announced a layoff, which some people inside the company were saying it is a shit show recently. Now, this was ended up being about a 4% layoff. I think it was just over 200 people getting let go across the company, kind of hitting all corners of it. And the worst part about this is that 2 weeks before this announcement happened, internal sources say that the CEO of the company said that they were not in a financial situation and they were not going to be doing layoffs, only to then do layoffs 2 weeks later, which there's no way to cut that. That's a bad look for the company. Moving on to the next negative piece of news, which was in September, basically exactly a year ago, they did a price increase, which they claimed was the first in 3 years. And it wasn't a dramatic price increase, but it was across the board for all the different levels of their plans. And one of the struggles I think with a price increase like this is, what is the value we're getting for the more money we're spending? That is something I, as a consumer, always ask is, if I spend X more, what am I getting for that value? And they claim they've spent more on their R&D, and it would have been, honestly, it would have been pretty nice to be able to point to this project to say, hey, with that R&D budget, we ended up releasing Gigia, a project that you can look at and you can learn from. But again, that was discontinued, so they don't actually have that. So now we fast forward into 2023. In January, they announced yet another layoff of nearly 300 people. And during that time, the CEO compared firing people to your parents asking you to eat your own vegetables, which I think just comes off tone deaf. So that's 2 layoffs basically within 8-month period, which brings us back to today. After their Unity Runtime Fee schedule announcement yesterday, people are rightfully pissed off at Unity. And I have some more anecdotal evidence of that. In my most popular video where I talk about why I think it might have been a mistake for me to switch from Unity to Godot, if I go in and I sort by the newest comments, in the past 48 hours, I've received a lot of comments of people telling me, no, Aramis, you have made the right decision to switch. Definitely, all these kind of people who are just rightfully mad. And you can see that even further in the stats where my 2 most popular Godot-focused videos have increased kind of in popularity. And, that's cool for me, good for me. But at the same time, I don't want Unity to go away. I want it to be a successful engine. Some of my favorite games of all time were made with Unity. You got Ori and the Blind Forest, Kerbal Space Program, some games I've never played like Escape from Tarkov or Firewatch, but massive games are made with Unity. And as a gamer, I want Unity to succeed because it is a lot of people's first entry point into game development. For me personally, it was. I started by watching Brackies, who no longer makes videos, but he has 1.67 million subscribers. And in a niche community of game makers and indie game developers, that's a lot of people. We're a pretty small and tight-knit community, and Brackies represented kind of a lot of people's entry point, and he used Unity, and we have Unity to thank for a lot of some of the greatest indie games of all time. So where do we go from here? Well, we have to keep giving Unity our feedback, but not in the form of personal threats toward their CEO or Unity employees. We have to give them constructive feedback, and if there's enough public outcry, their stock price will adjust accordingly, as we've seen already today, and they will make changes to address those. So keep being vocal, keep having your voice heard, and at the end of the day, if you want to switch to a different game engine, go for it. There's nothing holding you back. Your understanding of Unity will translate into Godot or Unreal or whatever you choose to do. Making games is a hard thing to do, and you shouldn't let the engine hold you back, and you should feel good about the engine you use. Honestly, if you're using Unity, keep on doing it. Keep on making games with Unity. It's probably not going to be a big problem for you because those thresholds are pretty high, and if you hit those thresholds, that sounds like a pretty good problem to have, and you can address that moving forward. I've been Aramis. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Have a good day.